Okay, welcome back. So today we're continuing our discussion about gases. Yesterday we covered the kinetic molecular theory and its description of gases, and also we talked about some physical properties of gases. Today we're going to focus on pressure. So I'll give you a few seconds to copy these notes down. All right, so pressure is an important thing with gases, and so we need a definition for pressure. Pressure, first of all, it depends on the force and the number of collisions per second on a boundary. And the way pressure is measured is its force per area. And we'll talk about that with the units here in a little bit. But just very important to know that it depends on force and number of collisions per second, because that goes back to our kinetic molecular theory. We measure pressure with a barometer. The first barometer was a column of mercury. It was a tube set in a dish of mercury, and it was discovered that the atmosphere would press on that mercury and it would go up the tube. And so when we look at our units, that describes one of our units. So let's take a look at that. Our first unit is an atmosphere, 1 atmosphere. This just describes the pressure of the atmosphere under certain standard conditions. Now, the 760 millimeters of mercury refers to this column of mercury I was talking about. It was discovered that if you had a dish of mercury and you put a tube in it, that the atmosphere would press the mercury up the tube 760 millimeters or 7.6 centimeters. So that's where this comes from. Now, notice these two units, 760 millimeters of mercury and 760 torrs. All of these different units, there are many different units that we use for measuring pressure. All of these are equal, so these will be our conversion factors. Notice that these two are exactly the same number, except for they have different labels. The reason for this is because over here, the millimeters of mercury is equal to the torr. This unit is named after the individual who developed the barometer that measured in millimeters of mercury, and his name was Torricelli. So they decided to basically say, well, let's name millimeters of mercury torrs in honor of him. Another unit we use is PSI. And so 1 atmosphere equals 760 millimeters of mercury equals 760 torr equals 14.7 PSI, which stands for pounds per square inch. And this really takes in the definition of pressure as far as force per unit area. This is the unit that you will commonly see on your tires for tire pressure. Pressure for your tires is measured in PSI. The SI unit is the Pascal, and so all of these other units that we've already talked about, 1 atmosphere equals 760 millimeters of mercury equals 760 torrs equals 14.7 psi equals 101,325 pascals. Okay, this is the SI unit. That's not really clear that that's an I. It looks like it might be a T. This is the SI unit for measuring pressure. We also sometimes write this as 101.3 kilopascals because, as you can see, this number could get really large really fast. So it's also commonly written as kilopascals. So let's take a look at how we can convert between these units. So I have a problem here that says convert 1.20 atmosphere to torr and psi. So I start with my known value, 1.20 atmospheres, and I am going to use my bridge notation to convert, which we had lots of practice with when we were doing stoichiometry. And remember, if I have atmospheres on the top, I have to have atmospheres on the bottom. Looking up my units up here, I have 1 atmosphere, so I write 1 atmosphere on the bottom. That cancels out. I need torr on the top, and 1 atmosphere is 760 torr. So I write 760 torr on the top. When I multiply 1.2 times 760, I get a value of 912 torr. Now remember, start out with 3 sig figs, have to end with 3 sig figs, okay? Or 3 significant digits. So 912 torr. For my second problem here, converting to PSI, 1.20 atmospheres. 1 atmosphere up here, 1 atmosphere is 14.7 psi. So when I multiply 1.2 times 14.7, I get 17.6 psi, pounds per square inch. So pretty simple problem compared to what we were doing with the stoichiometry, but again, we're using those conversions, the bridge notation that we learned, and we're going to continue using that a lot. So always remember, if it's on the top to convert, we also have to then put it on the bottom. Okay, so let's do some problems. I want you to look at page 249, 5 through 7. Now, stop and take a look at those problems. Try them on your own. See if you can do them first. And then I'll give you a few seconds to do that. And then I will show you the answers and then show you how to do the problems. Okay, so here are the answers. So for 5 and 6, and then for 7. Okay, so for 5, I'm not going to redo this one at all. This is just right straight out of the notes, just writing what they're all equal to. And you'll be using this for your conversion factors. For 6, the problem says, express a pressure of 0.85 atmospheres in torr, psi, and pascals. Remember significant figures. So I start with my 0.85 atmospheres. And I go back to my list that you have in number 5. And I know that 1 atmosphere, top and bottom there, equals 760 torr. So when I multiply 0.85 times 760, I get 650 torr. 2 significant digits because there's no decimal point after this, so the 0 doesn't count. For the next one, I want to convert to PSI. So I have 1 atmosphere is 14.7 PSI. Multiply 0.85 times 14.7, I get 12 PSI. 2 significant digits, 2 significant digits. And for the last one, 0.85 atmospheres, I am converting to pascals, so it's 101,325 pascals. cross those out, multiply these together. Now I'm going to write this in scientific notation because I just want two significant digits here, and I'd get a lot more if I don't. So multiply those together, you get 8.6 times 10 to the 4th pascals. So that's how you do number 6. For number 7, the problem asks, oh, and it looks like, sorry about the light here, I'm using natural light. So I'll try to adjust this the best I can. For number 7, which of these pressures is the lowest? And they give us 1.1 atmospheres, 16.7 psi, 740 millimeters mercury, and 111,458 pascals. Now, you could look at our list here of values and say, let's see, 1.1 atmospheres. Well, that's higher than this. 16.7 psi, higher. 740 millimeters of mercury, ooh, lower. And then 11,458 higher. So we could, by process of elimination, just note that the 740 torrs is the lowest. But just for practice sake, we can also convert all of them. And I would start with my 1.1 atmosphere. And I'm going to convert everything to atmospheres. So 16.7 psi, 14.7 psi is 1 atmosphere. And when I divide 16.7 by 14.7, I get 1.1 atmosphere. If I take my 740 millimeters of mercury, 760 millimeters of mercury is 1 atmosphere. Divide 740 by 760 and I get 0.97 atmospheres. And then for the last one, 111,458 pascals, 101,325 pascals are equal to 1 atmosphere. Do the division and you end up with 1.1 atmosphere. So clearly this value here is the lowest. Okay, I am going to stop the video here to do the next section on pressure, volume, and temperature so that the video doesn't get too long. So I'll be right back.